Welcome to another episode of the Webinar Talk Show. I am Liz Green.
And I am Tom Singer, and Eliz and I have been hosting the Webinar Talk Show for almost a year because we discovered hard to believe it's been a year. We discovered when this whole pandemic started that everybody was jumping to virtual events, be it webinars, conferences, meetings, and so many of them were kind of boring. And we learned that interviews and discussions were a great way to get content out there and at the same time make it engaging and fun. So we started this show and we've just never stopped. It's been a lot of fun, Eliz.
It has been a lot of fun, and frankly, it's what got me through those first really tough months. And it helped us hone the skills, right, of being virtual MCs and working together, because as you might imagine, it is not easy to avoid stepping on each other when we are in different states. It took a little while, and it's been a pleasure to do this for other groups, associations. I mean, that's the most fun, right?
Well, absolutely. And as we now move into this world where hybrid is becoming the buzzword of the meetings industry, one of the things we've discovered is you can't have a single master of ceremonies to run your in-person event and be the eyes and ears and voice for the virtual attendees. And so Eliz and I have this partnership where we can help a company or an association do the whole hybrid, both on camera, in person, and behind the scenes, kind of, helping drive the whole thing forward.
Right. And we've talked a lot about our association, the National Speakers Association, and I have the privilege of being on the committee that is advising the NSA staff about our annual convention, which is coming up in July, which is called Influence.
I am so excited. I just signed up. I just signed up last night.
Tom, I am like, speaking of fingers crossed, right? Come on, J&J. I need my vaccine. Come on, J&J.
Well, I'm hoping I will be vaccinated by that time, but I'm not in a high-risk category. You need to get vaccinated if you're going to go.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
I do indeed. So I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that I get to be part of that in-person audience. And to be honest, even if I'm there, I'm not sure I get to be in the audience because I am part of the Emcee team. But I am an MC that nobody will ever see, which is a little kind of against what you would expect, right?
Well, but it's one of the things we've discovered in the work that you and I have done with so many clients is that an MC is not an MC is not an MC. The term master of ceremony, there's so many things it can mean, and the definitions vary depending on who you talk to.
Right.
And what I think is great is that the work you've done with the National Speakers Association and the work that you and I have done, we've sort of identified there are different types of masters of ceremonies and hosts. And depending on what your event is, you need one or more of those people to fill those 4 different roles. And that's actually what today's episode of the Webinar Talk Show is all about. We're going to talk about why MCs are so important and what are the differences between the types of people you hire to fill that role.
Exactly. And as we moved last year into this fully virtual environment that we were all in for a while, and as now, as you said, we're moving into this hybrid environment, our meeting professional colleagues have really recognized, most of them, that an MC is really important. But I think there's some confusion about what MCs do. And there's some confusion about how do you actually hire a professional master of ceremonies and how do you work with that? So let's delve in a little bit to that.
Absolutely. And I just want to add that I have been for a decade working as a host, as a master of ceremonies for live in-person events. And many associations and companies just use their board president or their director of sales because they say, oh, it honors them or it gives them extra exposure or gosh, they have a great personality. But in the virtual world, what we're finding is a professional outside master of ceremonies can be the difference between an event being super engaging and being just another online talking head over PowerPoint back to back blah, blah, blah. So I do think
Right.
it's neat. The role has been recognized over the last year as, wow, that is a must have. But let's get into what we want to talk about today. And that is how do you hire them and what are the differences?
Right. So let's start with a role that a lot of us are going to be familiar with. It's what I call the driver MC. And I'm going to even read my description because I had to put together some descriptions of what these roles are in order to really be able to think about who do we want when we were looking at MCs for influence and how to move this forward as sort of a standard. I would love this to become a standard in our industry. So the first one is the driver MC, which might sound familiar. So a great driver is the pivot point of an event, but not the focal point. They're not me. They're all about what is going on in the event, whether it's face-to-face, hybrid, or virtual. A driver pulls the educational and thematic threads throughout the event. When done well, the driver's role highlights the presenters and the MCs. And the driver is like, that regal duck on the lake. Like everything is good. And under the water, it's like, because there's always something that goes wrong, whether it's a technical issue or if you're in person, the next speaker spilled water on his shirt and he needs to change it or go to the hairdryer quick. And so he's not going out on stage looking like he just spilled water all over himself. Those are the things that a driver handles. And I think this is the role most people are familiar with in terms of an MC.
So does the driver also do the content weaving that we hear so much about that people say is so important for these things? They're taking a little bit of what speaker number one said and in their mind, they're processing it with number two said, and they're sharing with the audience sort of that ribbon that runs through the whole event.
Right. So we've heard, even on this show and on your podcast for the National Speakers Association, Speakernomics, we've heard Sarah Michelle talk about that sort of thing. Sarah Michelle, I think, is a great example of somebody who's a driver for an event. For influence, it's going to be Patty Hendrickson.
She's going to be fantastic in that role.
I know. And so a good driver, a great driver, is pulling all of that information together, remembering what's coming ahead, remember what already happened, and what that educational theme is for that event, and constantly bringing that back in. Oh, remember what happened yesterday? That's related to this right now. And oh yeah, land that theme again so people walk away going, oh, that was all connected. That was really good. That's what a great driver does. Now, I think this is something that we're really good at, both of us. This is a role that we sit very comfortably in because it's what we've been doing for years. So that, and the people we've already mentioned. Anybody else that strikes your mind as are really great drivers?
There's so many people who do that role. I think our friend Jess Pettit sits in many roles when she MCs events, but I think she does a very good job of being, and it's sort of what she does in her career. She takes things that are, obscure and brings them together. And then the audience can be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So I think anyone who is really good at connecting the dots and being able to think on their feet, being able to, say, hey, did you notice this? And being able to do that content weaving, I think they're the ones who are really driving that show. And when you have a great person in that role, people are brought along on the journey rather than just being adrift in the audience.
Well, I love that you use the word connect, because the next MC role, very nice transition there.
I was going to say, you would think I knew what the next one is.
Well, I didn't tell you what order we were going to talk about, but good for you. Good. So our next MC role is the connector MC. And now, I will say, Tom Singer is absolutely an excellent connector MC. And this is the role. Let me just read it, and you can just nod in a very humble way. A great connector puts people at ease and draws them into conversation. The connector often plays the voice of the audience by picking up what people are chatting about in the hallway or the chat room and bringing it back into the event. Facilitating connection between audience members, especially between virtual and in-person audiences, is the main role here. Now, I know this is so like right down your professional expertise because this is something you talk about, right? Networking, getting people to use their time together effectively. How do you do that when you're trying to connect a virtual audience and an in-person audience?
Well, again, it's like you said, it's paying attention to what's going on in the chat. I sort of built my career long before there were the hybrid events. My sort of moniker was the conference catalyst.
Right.
And the idea was when I was your opening keynote speaker or your MC, people would connect more. I would be the catalyst that brought people together and changed the culture of that event. And one of the ways you do that is you have to talk to a lot of people. So before the event, having calls with key participants who will be at the event, key stakeholders arriving at the event, and going to the opening reception the night before it starts. If you're the speaker or the MC, nobody knows who you are. You're not part of their industry, but you need to participate in that.
Right.
So many people are like, well, I'm not going to that opening party. I'm going to stay in my room and do some work. The value is wandering around, getting to know the people. Why do you come? How many years have you been here? Because then you can get the stories from the audience and bring them to the stage and be able to share them with the audience that's in the room and the audience that's at home. And then it's also participating in that chat room if there is that virtual piece and being able to share with the people who are sitting in the room what's being said in the chat, because so often they're not logged on watching. Although I was at the National Speakers Association's winter conference, which was their first attempt at a hybrid event. And they didn't say this from the stage, but I noticed the person sitting next to me had logged on to the virtual event, turned down the sound on his phone and his computer, was paying attention in the room to the speaker, but at the same time was sharing in the chat. And so I logged on and did the same thing. And it really made that experience connected. So now with my clients, I'm saying this is something you should encourage your in-person attendees to do, is to play in the chat and make it easy for them to do it.
Well, and at Influence, I'm pretty sure you're going to be hearing that because that was a big takeaway of the winter conference experience. Another thing that a connector really can do to make the event more valuable is interviewing the speakers and the sponsors or vendors and connecting them with that virtual audience who don't get the sort of exhibit hall or the behind the scenes type of thing. Oh, we have, hold on, I have to clear that. I got a comment on, there we go, I got it. Anyway, Omakongo Dominga is going to be our connector MC at Influence this year. And his job is really going to be connecting that virtual audience to our in-person attendees, our presenters, and the sponsors, because particularly those sponsors and vendors want some FaceTime. They want some real connection with the people who are attending, who, are potential clients. Of course they do. So making that connection is really important. Any other connectors you can think of that?
Well, there's one thing I want to add first to that, and that is that you brought up the idea of the interviews being a key way to help connect people. And it's something that you and I have done with our mutual clients and with clients separately. And that is to get those sponsors some extra sort of face time. And one of the ways to do that is to interview them before, during, or after the event. And what I've seen is where that's been done, not only does it let the sponsor feel they got something value, I've actually seen sponsors use those interviews and put them on their social media or their website. So then your sponsor gets a takeaway where they're being seen as the expert because they're being interviewed, and they get to share that digital format in other ways. And so that just takes your conference beyond the conference. So interviews are super, super important. And not everyone has that ability. But what's going to be great with Omekongo at the National Speakers Association Influence Conference is he makes it so much fun the way he brings people and humanity together. So,
Right.
When you said think of somebody, that's kind of the first name that came to mind.
Right. So there we go.
he's so fun and unique in the way that he does it that he's going to be
Right.
great in that role.
I agree with you. And I think we heard when we had Dana Robb on the show a couple episodes back that the sponsors felt like they got more FaceTime with the attendees in a virtual experience than they do being in person. So why not give them more value? It doesn't cost anymore. It's really good. All right. Let us move on to another category. People may be familiar with this role. This is something I call the wow MC. Wow! So a wow MC creates memorable experiences that support the event theme and get people excited about returning the following year. A great wow MC brings something special to the table. An entertainment type quality. It might be juggling, magic, singing, game shows, parodies, comedies, whatever. And we know a lot of wow MCs.
We do.
A couple that jump to my first, our wow MC for influence is going to be Jeff Civilico.
And Jeff had a show for many years on the Las Vegas Strip. So he is a professional entertainer who had his own show in a theater in one of the big casinos. So he knows how to wow because that's what he's done for his whole career. So he's great. Another great person at WOW is Rob Foray. And Rob, his background is as a DJ for weddings and corporate events and high school and college events. So he knows how to bring the music and the fun, and he's really taken that whole game show idea. He's always wearing like a crazy blazer that has, pumpkins on it if it's Thanksgiving and shamrocks on it if it's, some other time. You're not going to see me in a shamrock blazer or a pink sparkly blazer. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to wow your audience, that's where the entertainer MC comes in.
Right. So Lynn Rose, another example.
She is so good. And she uses,
gorgeous singer.
That voice. Yeah. Her voice of adding song to it. John Petz is a wow with his magic that he can bring onto the thing, both close-up hand magic if it's on camera or large stage magic, things, makes people disappear, saws them in half.
And, and I'm going to talk about this person when we're talking about the next role as well, but Brian Walter brings the wow. I mean, his company is Extreme Meetings. So,
yeah. And he was probably the first corporate wow MC, and in the marketplace. I mean, he put the wow in wow.
Absolutely. So if you want game shows and a prize wheel and costume characters and, I would love to. Actually, he told me earlier that he doesn't have a closet for all of the costumes he owns. He has a separate building for all of the costumes and
that's a lot of costumes.
Well, and props and all kinds of things. So that is a highly produced experience, which leads me to the next role. This is the fourth of four, which is the coordinator / producer MC. So Brian's a perfect example.
I just have to say, who's great at that is Eliz Green, because you are the detail person of this relationship. I might be the connector, but you are the person who behind the scenes makes everything run so well.
Right. And, we've talked a lot about how hybrid and virtual events really should be run like a television show. And so this feeds into my media marketing background in so many ways. So let's just talk about this. And I am the coordinator producer for the NSA convention in July. You will never see me. I am the person behind the curtain making things happen. So much of the MC job happens behind the scenes. A coordinator or producer works hand in hand with the AV or production team and the event professional to orchestrate the event. In the virtual environment, the coordinator must be active in the chat to keep track of the quality of attendee experience and keep that communication on track. A great coordinator handles, I wrote this, and I really love this sentence. Are you ready? A great coordinator producer handles the load so the event professional can visit the restroom, eat a sandwich, and maybe get some sleep. It is taking, so Shauna said to us when we did the SpinCon event, I don't know, it's like yesterday and 100 years
December,
ago.
but yeah, it was like a
I don't know.
3-day. It was a 3-day event, and you and I served as the MCs for that
Mm-hmm.
event. And I do know that for her being the person who was running the event, she said it took a lot of pressure off of her having
Right.
someone else producing the show.
So that is the whole point. Now, so we have those 4 roles. We have our driver, we have our connector, we have our wow, and we have the producer coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Most MCs can serve in a couple of those. Many MCs can kind of provide a little bit of everything. For example, I know you wouldn't qualify yourself as a wow MC, but I've also seen you do like pre-filmed things where you're climbing out of like climbing around in a manhole. Was that right?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a conference where we had done a whole series of production videos beforehand that got weaved in. So at one point, I climbed down a manhole on the stage, and then the video plays as if this whole thing was happening live underground, which it wasn't. I was just standing underground waiting for 4 minutes, and then I climbed back up. But I do have the high energy just
Mm-hmm.
naturally built into the way I talk. So I would be like naturally kind of wow light, but I'm willing to play. I'm always willing to play with clients who want to do something that's higher production, but I don't typically lead it. I can be the talent and I can help with that.
Right.
So I do agree that every MC should have a little piece of everything.
Right.
Again, I help produce shows that I'm involved in, not to the
Exactly.
level that you would. So everybody should be able to do that. But most of the MCs that I think about live solidly in 1 or 2 lanes.
Right.
And what's so interesting about what your committee has decided for the conference that you're helping plan is that you're going to have 4 people
Mm-hmm.
in the role over the course of the 3 days. And I think that's awesome.
Well, and we've talked in the past about, how many MCs do you need and that sort of thing. What NSA is really doing is really trying to think forward about what events are going to look like in the future. We're not just planning this one, we're laying the groundwork for what influences are going to look like going forward. And really thinking about those roles and not saying, oh, one person's the MC for Saturday and then another is Sunday and then another is Monday. No, they actually have different roles that they're playing and will coordinate amongst them what makes sense. Who's going to introduce which speaker? How are we going to make those transitions? So it may be that our driver and our wow are on stage together, but they're actually given different responsibilities for that little time frame. It's really thinking about what does your event need. In a small association, like we talked about with Dana a few episodes back, it was all me. I was the producer and the MC, the driver for the event. We did some connection as well. I'm hoping we played trivia at the end. That was a little bit of wow. So it's all wrapped up together. But it just a bigger event, a more ambitious event, is going to need more personnel to make it go well.
And one of the things that I've done over the years for in-person events is sometimes the organization does have a board chair who needs to be
Mm-hmm.
the face of the event, but they don't have the driver and the connector piece, but they need
Mm-hmm.
to be there as a thing. So I've worked together. I can think of one
Right.
client that I emceed with for 4 years, and their board president and I would sit down and we would write sort of little scripts where we could banter back and forth and have some fun. And he could play with the fact that I wasn't from their industry. So he could use industry jargon and we could make fun of it like I didn't know what it was. And we were able to
Mm-hmm.
create that. So sometimes, the idea of combining more than one person on stage, if you have the right people, is such a good idea. So I'm now really excited about the NSA's conference this summer
Yeah.
because we'll get to watch how those 4 MC types with 4 different people get so intertwined and run together. This is going to be a great case study.
It is going to be a great case study, and I think we know so many people who have skills in this arena. I mean, we've had quite a few of them on the show. So I think Marquessa Petway is another person that if somebody, and I'm going to suggest you do this if you're watching this and are a meeting professional, if you are looking at having an MC, of course we'd like you to hire us. But if we don't fit your needs, we know so many people. Ask us. Ask
Please.
us about what you need, or ask us how to work with them. And I want, our time goes really fast, especially when we're just talking with each other. But I do want, as we promised, to give a few tips about how to hire a professional master of ceremony and how to work with them.
Absolutely.
I think the first thing is to really think about, what do you need? You can always book some time with me or with Tom and talk through what your event needs. Use this as a resource. We're more than happy to talk through that. In addition, there are a lot of people who say that they're an MC. Ask for some references. Ask, we're living in a virtual world. Ask to see some video of them doing an event. The people who have experience aren't going to balk at that request. They've got it fired up. They're like, here's my YouTube. I'll send you 6 links. It'll be right there. So,
and another important thing to do when you're going to hire an MC is think about who is in my audience.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen organizations put someone in the role for the wrong reasons and it falls flat. You put a comedian in with a group that isn't there for comedy, probably isn't the right fit. Same thing, you need to take into effect what's the age of our audience, what's the other types of backgrounds of our audience, and what's the purpose of the event. Because your master of ceremonies, if they do a great job, they become sort of the host of the whole event, even if they're from outside your organization. What I tell people who are emceeing for the first time is, it's not like you give a keynote and then you leave, or you get to go to your room when you're not on stage. Every time there's a coffee break, if it's an in-person event, the MC needs to be present. You wouldn't invite people to a dinner party at your home and then go to your room and take a nap. You need to be present when the event is open because you're the host of the whole show.
Right.
And so it's realizing, is that something you want? Some of my clients, if it's an internal company meeting, they have things where they don't want outsiders present. So they don't want me at the dinner. Other people are like, you'll come to the dinner? We've always wanted our MC to participate. Right. Know what you want and work that into your contract, like how much time you expect them to be present on stage and off.
Well, and I think recognize also that while it looks like the amount of time is like, it's from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, and you think, well, it's just that amount of time. Oh no, not if it's done well. And of course, it depends on what you're asking your MC to do. If it's that production coordination piece, there are production calls to have with those presenters to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that they have what they need, working with the AV or production team to make sure all of that is coordinated. That is a huge investment of time. So it's just not the time you're like holding the microphone and speaking to the audience. And that may be 5 minutes, and then you get, an hour-long keynote or a continuing education program or whatever it is. We're not checked out during that time. We have to be listening and paying attention that whole time, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person. We are present the whole time. I have to say, this work, as much as I love it, is harder in many ways than sort of showing up and
it's a lot harder
to
be the master of ceremonies is a lot harder than to give a speech or do a workshop. And the other thing is that different clients have different expectations of how scripted do you want your MC to be. I personally don't like to work super scripted. I don't
Mm-mm.
want a teleprompter that I have to stay with. And I have one client who is very scripted, but after 3 years of being their MC, she got very comfortable with opening 7 minutes, Tom riffs. Then the
Nice.
script comes up for the next introduction or whatever. But the
Right.
first year, she was like, "What are you going to do for 7 minutes?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm going to get people. I'm going to use my connector material. We're
Right.
going to talk about how we're going to maximize the event." And the first year, she was like, "But what are you going to say?" And I'm like, "My stuff." And she was petrified. And by the third year, she's writing the script. Tom riff 5 minutes, and she's like,
Right.
he'll figure it out.
Right. Well, and you always want to leave space for spontaneity, which is something we say in production meetings. If it's an hour long keynote, we're going to plan for 45 minutes and leave 15 minutes for spontaneity, whether that's Q&A or oh my goodness, you breezed by this one thing. I want to go back there because that was really interesting. That sort of spontaneity, that's what people remember a
For
lot
sure.
of the time.
Absolutely. Well, we could talk about MCs for hours, apparently, and
We
we've already
evidently
gone
can.
long. We've already gone long today. But if anybody has any questions about these 4 types of MCs, why we think this is the way you need to be thinking when you're deciding who to hire, don't just Google Master of Ceremonies unless you find us. Make sure that you
Right.
make sure that you're going into it with a plan. And one of the best things to do is ask other meeting planners,
Hmm.
ask other speakers who go to a lot of meetings. Who have you seen? Who do you
Right.
know? And the National Speakers Association has an entire section on their website where you can put Master of Ceremonies in and
Yep.
search for people who claim that that's part of their business.
Absolutely. Now, if you have questions about that, would like to talk to Tom and I, Tom, where would they find us?
I think they could go to webinartalkshow.com. You'll see some of our past episodes, and you'll also find all of our contact information right there.
Absolutely. Now, next week, we are back, but things are a little bit different. We do not have a show on Monday, but we have 2 shows on Wednesday. 2! WebinarTalkShow.live is where you're going to find us. We have 2 people. One, we're going to talk about just in terms of communicating your value, which is our theme. We're going to have Steve Miller, who I'm not even going to tell you what he's going to talk about because you just are going to be blown out of the water by the wisdom he will drop. So that's at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. And who do we have at 1 o'clock on Wednesday?
At 1 o'clock, we have Joseph Jaffe, and he is an author and a speaker and a thought leader. But much like us a year ago when Corona hit, he started a talk show that he does 5 days a week called Corona TV. And we couldn't have him on at 11 because he's on at the exact same time, 5
He's
days
the
a week.
competition, Tom?
He is the competition at 11 o'clock for Facebook Lives, but we're going to have him on at 1 o'clock Central Time, and we're going to be able to talk about sort of, just what he's done and what he's seen through this pivot for the last year. And he has really done something that's amazing with the audience that he's grown. So we wanted to learn from him.
Absolutely. So we'll see you next week, 2 times on Wednesday. Until then, have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. See you next Wednesday.
Bye, y'all.